So now it's my pleasure to introduce the speaker.
Does anyone need sign language interpretation? Thank you.
Just clap for her. Thank you. I'm going to introduce our speaker. The Right Reverend Dr. Trevor Alexander was born in Rumford, Essex in England. He and his wife, the Reverend Dr. M. Alexander, which is I, have three wonderful girls. Bishop Trevor Alexander retired from the U.S. Army in 1995. Bishop Trevor holds an graduate degree from the University of the Incarnate Word in psychology, holding emphasis on family and religious studies, along with the Master's of Arts degree in pastoral ministry from Outlake School of Theology, a Doctor of Divinity degree from St. Thomas Christian College and Seminary of Jacksonville, Florida, and is currently working on a postdoctorate in Christian counseling, Bread of Life Theology Seminary, San Antonio, Texas. Bishop Alexander is currently serving at the University of the Incarnate Word for almost 25 years as the Protestant chaplain, and adjunct faculty. Amongst his other accomplishments, he is the senior pastor of True Vine Church and the Southwest Texas Regional Bishop for the Kingdom Council of Interdependent Churches, Christian Churches and Ministries. Bishop Trevor has published several articles on matters pertaining to the African American community and has presented in numerous conferences, locally, nationally, and internationally. On February the 15th of 2016, he was inducted into the San Antonio Black Worship Hall of Fame. During the month of February in 2018, Bishop was recognized by the University of the Incarnate Word Black History Month Committee with Alumni of Distinction Award. He recently completed a 4-year term as the Vice President of the United States Catholic Mission Association, USCMA, and is continuing to serve the association. He is a Dr. King Scholar and has published several articles on Dr. King's beloved community. Well, let me let you know this, because I know him. He will be fabulous. You're going to have a great time. So let's clap for him.
Reading all that. Who's that guy? Is me? Oh. Well, good morning. Oh, I need this. All right, I have to use this. Am I good sounding? Good. Good morning, everyone. Hope y'all can hear me well. I know people in the back, y'all thought this was church. This is not church, so you come up to the front. But you might get some background noise because you sat in the back. But this is going to be a conversation. I don't like this standing up doing presentation. That's not my lecturing style. I like to have some dialogue. But so I would pause, ask some questions. Now, obviously, I will not get to everybody because I have 1 hour to do this in. So we're going to talk about mental health, specifically in the Black community, but it's also relationship in the brown community. So let me see if this is working. It is working well. Can y'all see this well back there? Good. So this is basically 5 stages. So what I'm going to begin is to show a clip. It's about 11 minutes long. And then after the clip is finished, I'm going to ask you what's your takeaway. What did you get from that? And then we go into the lecture. So my assistant, this is one day I get to boss her around. All the other days don't work that way.
Forward to having this conversation today about African Americans and mental health.
A lot in our culture thinks that you can just pray things away. I believe in prayer, no doubt, but I also understand that not one miracle in the Bible occurred without the person needing the miracle taking action.
What's difficult sometimes is probably reflecting on being a community member who may feel like you've lost your role and you need help in reconnecting.
We are such a strong, resilient people. And sometimes because of that, we have this, or oftentimes I think, there's this stoicism about us. And it's like we're not allowed to be upset, we're not allowed to have depression or anxiety.
So I'm excited to sit down, brother, with my sister, talk about mental health in our Black community. Let's make it happen. That's a good question. And since I'm the least among these two, I'm gonna
Not at all.
guys go ahead first. Well, Dr. Logan, why don't you start out with that, if you don't mind?
Okay. So my why, I mean, and when it comes to mental health in the Black African American community, I'm reminded of a healthy cultural mistrust. We historically, Black and brown people have not trusted mental health
Sure.
medical field, and have had good reason to. Have had very good reason to. And we can think about, slavery and how people were treated, how, the idea that we don't feel any pain. So I think just the visual of us, the visual of people who look like those African American community, who represent that community, it releases some of that stigma automatically. And we have just never been given permission to not keep going. And to not just be like it doesn't bother us. Our men have it, our women have it, our children have it, and I do think that it is hurting us, it's killing us. So being able to have some permission, and I think with permission comes words. Like, there's so many people I've worked with that don't know how to put words to what's happening, and words are so powerful, and we can heal through that. So that's a huge part of my why.
Shahid, you want to go next, brother Shahid? You want to go ahead?
I appreciate the invitation, Pastor. As you said earlier, Dr. Logan, there is a mistrust there, because there is equally so a mistreatment, right? That's either driven by racism and the mistreatment, misdiagnosing, and the incarceration of, folks who are copper, Black, people of color, whatever it is that they would point us as, in any time frame. Our mental health was usually leveraged against us to really be the basis of the science and laws that existed to enslave us.
Right.
It was considered a disorder to want to be free, to run, to flee, all those things. It was a disorder to not want to be anything other than what, a white slave master wanted you to be.
Yeah.
And that's the genesis of this industry. And go figure, with that genesis, we don't account for all the hurts, the pains, everything that's inhumane that's gone into this. And mind you, what I'm saying isn't like, that's the way it is for everyone. It's just my reflection.
Such wonderful answers to that question. I guess for me, guys, it's I'm coming from a Christian point of view. I'm a pastor of a church, but I'm gonna tell you the mistake that our people make. They think that you can just pray mental illness away. You can't. You can't. There's no indication. You just pray something away. If we study the Bible, we study the life of Christ. I'm a believer, Christ follower. There was always some action that had to take place before the healing and before the miracle. But when Brother Shahid said that it was viewed as a mental illness to want to be free, right? So if I flip that and answer the question now, like, is it a mental illness? Do you guys think it's part of a mental illness to want to be accepted by them in the worst way? Because I never really have. But because I didn't, I was always unruly. They called me unruly, they called me angry. And so with all of that and raising black males in my family, and now my grandkids are going through that, they have this desire to be accepted by this culture, by these people that really don't. If you can't dribble a basketball, catch a football, or sing or dance, they're not really worried about your intellectual properties and how intelligent you can be. But Bro Shaheed, when you said that, man, that it was considered mental illness to want to be free, they still think there's something wrong with that.
Pastor Graves, if I may, I even pose the question, is it crazy to want to stay or be a part? And I go one above that, and that I think it's colonial.
Yeah.
When we think racism and its effects, and its dehumanizing effects and so on, racism is still a tool. You know what I mean? There's a whole shed in which that tool has come from. And I feel it's colonization, and colonization it doesn't look good, feel good, it's inhumane for any that are the perpetrators of it, or those who wind up experiencing it as victims or whatever the case may be. It distracts us, I feel, or I believe, from acknowledging that, it can't heal the pain that it's caused. It's going to take us returning to a certain way of actually being with each other. Something that was said by you, Dr. Logan, was this idea of permission. Imagine us being from cultures that heavily relied upon being seen, being brought into life, being given permission. And then when you fundamentally deprive people of that really crucial and critical cultural value, spiritual value, they're lost.
Yeah.
The word that comes to mind is validation, and it's important for us to give ourselves permission to try to find what our words are, to name what's happening, because it happens all the time, and we're told it's not real, and it is real. We don't need that validation, I think.
For me, I get a chance to watch people heal together, and that's because we don't brush things under the rug. If a brother or sister are struggling in any area, let's talk about it, let's deal with it, let's try to point you in the right direction. I just think that our mental healing is not something that can be done alone. All of these things that we're talking about, we've never talked about before. And that's what's celebratory about this conversation, is that now we can be better parents, we can be better grandparents, we can be better aunts and uncles. We can say, wait a minute, they need this conversation right now. Because I remember when I needed it and it wasn't available. And so I think that's the beginning part of us really recognizing the village is going to have to take part in it. You're going to have to be in a community of people to really help us get to that place to where we are dealing with our mental illness and are becoming mentally healthy as we're walking this journey of life. So.
So what's your takeaways? What do you get from this? Silent night, holy night. I feel like I'm back in church again. So what do you get from that? Yes, ma'am?
Bringing people together.
Bringing people together. Can you hear the audience? Do I need to repeat what's being said? Repeat it? Okay. Bringing people together. Ma'am,
That certain behaviors and certain cultures are inherited because of oppression that's occurred, those cultures throughout history. And it goes as far as epigenetics, like actually affecting the way people's genetics present because of that trauma, even if it happened generations before that. And in those communities, because they've been traumatized like that, they have a tendency to not address those issues because everybody needs to toughen up and pull it up by the bootstraps. You got enough problems, you got enough stuff going on, and not deal with those things. And then those people are left behind, and that's why we have such high suicide and high violence rates. And so dealing with it as a community is knowing that it's there, accepting the things that happen that made us feel that way, and coming together as a community and discussing that, and embracing the people that need our help is the only way to really effectively combat mental health issues in our community.
I'm gonna sum that up with generational trauma. One more over here. Let's do it.
My takeaway was that when we give ourselves permission, that's freeing us, and it also frees those around us.
Give ourselves permission. And I love she used the word, we don't have to always seek validation. We control our own narrative versus somebody else controlling it for us. One more from this side, because everything will be from this side. You are included.
We are talking.
Okay, yes, whoever.
I feel what you're going to say, and a lot of times we think that we can pray it away,
Mhm.
understanding what mental health is and what that means. And when you talk about generational trauma, we've been taught to do certain things we've not been taught to. So I want more to work in the church with the mental health because it does give you, it's free.
Freeing, yeah, so we just can't pray it away. We have to acknowledge it, right? But and can't fix it. The Holy Spirit can do a lot of things, but He leads us into truth and righteousness. That means sometimes seeking a counselor. Sir, you had your hand up.
I'm speaking for all the Hispanics in San Antonio. They have a problem with mental health. Speaking up about it, everything is quiet, abuse, generational,
Yeah.
and it affects the family and even jealousy within the brown community of others being successful. And that hurts a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because then it's hard for us to reach out to other people that are different from us. But Christ is not like that. I always talk to people, I always say, is Christ divided so many different denominations, or is there one world family? And they look at me like, wow, what do you think like that? I go, because I see it everywhere I go. I know God is doing something beautiful in the situation that we're all learning.
And I would add to that, black, brown face the exact same challenges, but we have been told or taught to separate. The pie is big enough for all of us to eat, and we don't need to fight each other. Okay. So I have very short time to get this done, so I'm going to speed through some of this because I believe there's enough information there. If you want this PowerPoint, see me afterwards. Is there some place to take the names down? I can send it to you. But really, we want to get to the conversation. Because one of the things I loved about this clip is we are not having the conversation. We're not having it at the kitchen table. We're not having it in our churches. In my own family, I had an aunt who was, I think 3 years, she was committed. To this day, I still have no clue why. Matter of fact, this is how it was explained to me. Where's that Jean? Oh, she's on vacation. I kid you not. So it worked for the first time. 6 months later, they lived a little distance away. So 6 months later, we go back. Where's that Jean? She's on vacation. I'm 11 years old. Man, that's a long vacation. For 3 years, she was on vacation. 3 years, and when she came back, no explanation. She's now deceased. My uncle's deceased. Have no explanation. We don't even talk about it. So if we're not talking about these types of issues, we give permission for people to suffer in silence. And if you see the statistics there, all races, all cultures suffer, but black and brown community suffer in silence. I'm going to bypass that. There's the stigmas, right? They mention a lot of the stigmas in this clip. Name some stigmas that you are aware of that may not be listed. I don't list them all, but what do you think? Sir?
One of the things is that, okay, we as Black and brown people, there aren't enough of our caregivers to help us. And there aren't enough of our people to help our people. And obviously, it's the most important part of therapy is the therapeutic relationship.
Yes.
And it's much easier to trust someone who you relate to, who can understand where you come from, whether it be Black or brown. And we encourage anyone who's thinking about counseling to get into the profession for that reason, because it offers diversity as a profession to the people in need. And we're beginning to realize, because our neighborhoods, like you said, sir, we're talking our neighborhoods, it's machismo thing. And we as men are especially affected by this because we're taught to be we have to provide, we have to take care of it, we have to keep our promises to ourselves. And that often leaves us on a mountain with nobody to turn to. So it's important that we have someone who looks like us that we can say, hey, sir, I'm going through it. Because you can't very well turn and say, buddy, hey, Bubba, hey, Susan, I'm feeling kind of depressed today, because they laugh at us because it's what we're taught. And that's where the stigma comes.
You actually saw my presentation and you jumped ahead because I have that listed. But that is right. You're 100% right. Let me get this young lady over here. Yeah, I said thank you.
We're looking at it in the Black, Hispanic, and those different communities, but wasn't it really just the whole world that if you have some type of mental illness or you're under one roof?
That was the overall, yes, but it get perpetuated in certain cultures and is enforced. Ma'am.
So my boss, Beverly Watts Davis, is an experienced grant writer who formed the Rock of Culture. And so we recognize that as a problem in culture. And Dr. Huey Petty was a member of that. She's here today with WestCare. So if you guys would like maybe like some information, get some funding together to get a cohort of more Black churches that would like some mental health training and certification, I can set you up with her today.
What a shameful plug. I love it. I love it. So you had your hand up.
I would just add, so from the perspective of minority communities, Black, brown, I would include Asian communities in that. That the perception of that this weakness is actually gets in the way of our liberation versus it being a path to our own definition of liberation, right? Which is that perception of what liberation is, someone's projection of liberation, right? Whereas I would hold that this is part of it.
Right. And we also have to be careful how we interpret scriptures, right? And how scriptures is taught across the pulpit. And I remember, this is not in my notes, but this is my, sitting, listening to somebody preach from Numbers, I believe it's 11, when Moses and Miriam is having a conversation, and they say, well, Moses is married to that Ethiopian. And it sounded like it's a bad thing. And if you think of Ethiopia, that we see in TV with the starving children, you think he married down. And that's what he came across in the pulpit. Then I started studying. Ethiopia was one of the leading cultures in a lot of things. Matter of fact, the Egyptians stole a lot from the Ethiopians. So he didn't marry down, he married up. But when you get a bad image of what Black people look like in scripture, one of the reasons I became a King Scholar, because as a child, I was about 9 years old when he was assassinated, but I was always fascinated with him because he spoke a language that says, I'm somebody. And I became a scholar by realizing that there's somebody, one, that looked like me, two, somebody that told me, don't let the environment that you're in tell you who you should be. So generation things are handed down, right? Look at all these folks. I just put it in there. People, you don't realize who's suffering. We see them on TV. They have this script, making all this money, and folks are suffering. Dr. King suffered from severe depression, right? My aunt suffered from this depression I know now because I know the symptoms. But you know how she masked it? Alcohol. Almost every time I saw her, she had a glass in her hand, and it was Johnny Walker. That's a drink of choice. And it ran out of Johnny, whatever was there. And see, she was always drunk. But we thought it was more alcoholism, right? But it was really mental health with self-medication. So we are a resilient people. You heard it in that clip. I grew up my life, I'm resilient. You know what that means? You suffer in silence because I'm resilient. You got to be strong. So I'm going to share a quick personal story. I didn't clear it with my wife, so I'm not going to look at it. But I've used this several times before. Yeah. But I'm going to share this. This is I'll put March 10th.
Yes.
It's okay? Okay. I got to go home with her, y'all. So March 10th, 1989, we lost our first child, Joshua Emmanuel. I was in the military. I went back to work. My commander says, how are things going? Make sure you're strong for your wife. Okay? Got that. Went to church. Pastor said, hey, make sure you're strong for your wife. So I was. I became so strong that 3 months later, I lost it. Nobody asked me, how you doing? Can I help you? I went to the chaplain, and the chaplain said, man, your wife gonna need you more than ever. Okay. He didn't ask me how I was doing. So I suffered in silence. One Sunday, she'll tell you, I went to church, sat down, and the preacher started preaching. And in our tradition, we have this thing called altar call where you come and get prayer. I knew I needed prayer. I walked up to the front to get prayer, and I started crying. The first time I ever cried in public. And I'm having this conversation with myself. Shut up, man. People are looking at you. You're embarrassing yourself. You're supposed to be strong. You're supposed to be resilient.
I've been there.
You've been there?
Yeah.
Yes. And the more, and y'all don't know that's Ann Hill, okay? Yeah, she cries a lot. No. But the more I had this conversation, the more I started crying. And then they couldn't do nothing with me. So they put me off in a room. I'm going to use this analogy. You remember Charlie Brown has that teacher, and wah, 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 wah. Yeah, that's what people were sounding like to me now. Now I'm scared. Because I can't even understand plain old English. I'm having a nervous breakdown, don't know it. Somewhere they went and got her. The only voice that I recognized that day was hers. And the trigger was, I was going to fly back to the hospital where we lost our child. And I had to do this by myself. But I didn't know what to do with that feeling. And I never dealt with that feeling again until I got to seminary. And then I went to CPE.
Mm-hmm. Preach.
I hated CPE because it pulled out stuff that
that happened to me too.
You hated it too, right? Right? Because it pulled out stuff out of me that I was trying to hide.
Right.
So I can suffer in silence so you never know.
Can you find CPE?
Yeah, oh, CPE, Clinical Pastoral Education. I have 3 units, I'm not doing 4. Technically, you don't need 4 unless you want to come. You got, really? Bless your heart. I'm not planning to be an educator, none of that stuff. I'm good for one. Yes, it is. He's a junkie. But we have to realize that slavery has an effect on us to this day. And I cited this case with Brown versus the Board of Education. And they would sat down these children and asked to pick the beautiful dolls. And they picked out the white dolls and left it. I was asked a question not too long ago, actually about just before COVID, about 2019. Have you ever thought about being white? Seriously, somebody asked me that. I had to assess. And yeah, that's a good word. I had to assess to make sure I don't cuss when I'm sorry, that came out wrong. That I responded and I don't speak in foreign tongues. Because I found that very offensive. As if my skin color is a problem. I've loved who I've been all these years. I didn't think it was a problem. But when you ask me, have I thought about being white, as if that being black is bad. But these are the questions that come around that we get hit with. Another one, I was at a conference and breakout session. So we're going around introducing ourselves and this, so and so and so and so, and all these doctors and so in there. So I figured I use mine too. I'm Dr. Trevor Alexander. Somebody said, what school you went to? I stopped and looked at her and said, why do I have to qualify myself to be at the table when nobody else did? And I was the last speaker, by the way. And it's that type of stuff that you get faced with, and somebody says, well, you're looking for racism. No, I'm not.
Right.
It's in my face.
Right.
I now have to choose how to deal with it. But if I'm suffering with mental health, I'm suffering with self-image, I'm suffering all of that, I don't know where to go. So back to your point, sir, that you stole my stuff from us. I never had a therapist that looked like me. I still don't. I have a therapist now. We've been together for a while. She knows me now. She thinks I'm crazy, but anyway. But we had to build relationship.
You need one, Doc?
Yeah, I come looking for you. Pro bono? Brother man, no. But it's those type of things that happen, right? And so if you're suffering in silence, you have all these issues, and I have to be resilient. So if I'm not strong, then the opposite of that is you're weak. And if I'm weak, I'm not a real, now my manhood is challenged, right? And if my manhood is challenged, then my fatherhood is challenged. Then my relationship with my nephews and nieces are challenged. It's not just one, it just keeps spiraling. And eventually, I have to determine what I'm going to do with that. And many of us will suffer in silence, and we mask it by self-medication or other things. And it doesn't always have to be alcohol. You know, some people are workaholics. That's another medication. I don't want to go home to face this. Because if I go home, then my weakness will show. So I stay at work, because at work I have a title. Yes. You know, when you have a title, people think you're important. I had a title before I retired. And I came out and started using my title, folks. I don't know what that means. You want to, this is, okay. So I need a job, don't have a job. I'm thinking I got all these credentials, nobody's hiring me. So I went and interviewed for Jenny Craig. You know that challenged me? Yeah, because I'm like Jenny Craig. But I want a job. But it played with my mental psyche. Why are you going to Jenny Craig, man? You're not even fat. Can I be transparent? So I'm going through this conversation, but I need to put food on the table. And if you don't put food on the table, you're not a good provider. So go to that interview. Yeah. Anyway, I got a job, but I didn't take it. But we really have to really understand these things. And so these stigmas, these types of trauma, this is just full. There's a whole lot more to this. Trauma is like an onion. You keep peeling it back, and the more you peel it back, there's so much more. So much more. Generational trauma, there's complex trauma, there's historical trauma, there's all types of trauma. And I bet you it's somebody, I'm sorry, I'm a clergy, we can't bet. There's folks in this room. One of these days when I hit the lottery, I gotta play it. Okay, but all of us in this room have experienced some form of trauma, right? And let me get to this next one real quickly. PTSD is not reserved for military folks. I've heard that so many times. I'm not military, so I don't have PTSD. You can have it. You can have it and not even be related to the military. And studies are showing that black folks, especially youth, are more prone to be diagnosed with PTSD if they ever seek help. I didn't know what all these acronyms, what do you call that? When you had to take hypertension and when you're overactive in school. AD, see, I didn't know that. I was a smart young man, too smart. I finished early. And if you know me, you leave me to myself. I have conversation with self and stuff come out loud, such as, why is toothpaste called toothpaste when you brush your teeth? It should be toothpaste. Oh, I was 11 years old when I did that, and I was sent to the principal's office. Because I'm thinking, but I'm not challenged. And so I became a problem child, and they corrected me by punishing me. Oh, I went to school and corporal punishment was, yeah. And so we don't know how to deal with our children who are smart because you're not fitting the box. And when you don't fit a box, you become a problem. And then you treat you as a problem, so you grow up thinking you're a problem child. Not a smart child, a problem child. Yeah, so there's a whole lot of issues here. All right, because I had to get there. And one of the reasons we don't trust folks, especially in the medical field, yes, there's not enough that look like us, but we have heard the stories of generation before us, how they suffered at the hands of those who went to seek help. And sometimes when you just go in for a doctor's appointment and how your doctor don't even pay you attention. And you have to fight to be heard and fight for you to get the right type of treatment or at least the right type of testing because they think we are there to occupy their time. Yeah. Okay, so let me back up. One of the things I know I did with my children, we have 3 girls. And I will remind my girls when they got in the vehicle to drive, remember you're driving while black. They are like, what does that mean? We had to have the conversation. Because if you get stopped, this is what you have to do. You know how many times I was stopped when I lived in New York City? Yeah, a lot. I got stopped one time, this is before I met her, long before I met her. I was dating a young lady, and she lived in this area called Far Rockaway. And if you know New York City, Far Rockaway is predominantly folks that don't look like me. Yeah, you got it. So every time I dropped her off, I made a left turn and left turn. First of all, the cops would follow me in. I make the left turn, I'm out of sight, pull me over. Had to put my hand on the hood. It's been running, it's hot, and my hand is on the hood, and it's hot. And they had to give me questions. Then I get back in my car and I start crying because I'm traumatized, but I don't know what to do with that trauma. I don't even know who to speak to about that trauma. That relationship didn't last long. About 3 months, we had to be done. It wasn't because the relationship couldn't work. I couldn't go through the treatment of being stopped every single time and be dehumanized. And that trauma is still with me. And I didn't want my children to go through that, so they have to have the talk. How many of us have to have the talk with our children about what it means to driving 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? You have that talk. Why do we have that talk? You want them to come home safe. Man, our time is really moving. It's important that we have the conversation. It's important that we share the trauma that our forefathers and foremothers have experienced. My mother has no more than a 3rd grade education. She had to drop out of school to take care of her siblings. My grandmother had a stroke. She dropped out of school. Never went back. But you know what my mother always told us? Y'all going to go to school. And you're going to get an education. And can I just say, Louise, you bet not. Tell her you ain't going to school. My mother's 5'5" and left-handed. And all of us, I have 4 siblings, all of us have done pretty well. But she'd never been in high school. So when she came to visit years ago, I work at the University of Encounter Word, and I took her into the classroom so she could see what a classroom looks like. But she was traumatized. My grandmother was a maid. I remember watching The Help. And I told my wife, I said, that's my grandmother. Cleaning houses. But she did it with so dignity. But some of those folks that she worked for didn't always treat her nice. I remember she came home one day and she said they left some money out to see if I would take it. That mistrust is built in. Our family system is set up differently than most folks. The brown and black community, we have extended family members that we thought were real family. Come on now. I had an aunt. I found out when she died, she was not even close to blood related to us. She was always auntie, right? So when auntie died, our family was not listed in the obituary. I was saying, why are we not mentioned? We're not related. Oh, but they were extended family. So when you start talking about your family members, one more story and then I'm back up. My middle child had an issue in school, and I went to have a conversation with this particular person. And I said, y'all not going to damage my baby. And the woman said, that's a problem. You see her as a baby. And then something inside of me snapped. I said, excuse me, ma'am. You do what you do in your family, and I do what I do with my family. And if she's 99 years old, I'm still living, she's still my baby. And secondly, you damage her, you don't want to see Trevor. I wasn't bishop at the time either, but still. So I tell folks, there's three of me. There's Trevor, Trevor the bishop, and Bishop Trevor. Bishop Trevor's a nice guy. Trevor the bishop mediates. Something happened the other day. I was harassed by a call, and I was trying to get something accomplished, and this woman kept talking over me. And Trevor the bishop said, let Trevor get out. And Trevor came out. But my point is, I have to learn me and the appropriate ways to handle certain. You can't always be angry at every time you get into a situation, even though you feel angry, because sometimes you just don't get stuff done. And then you get in that category, you're the angry black man. I am loud. And people walk into my office all this time. I can hear you down the hallway. So what? Shut your door. Seriously, I hear it. And I'm at the age now, right? I don't laugh when it's not funny. I don't scratch when I don't have an itch. So I really don't care. But it took me a while to get there because I was always seeking validation. In the military, I was always seeking validation so I can climb the ladder, get promoted. So I played the game. I don't play games no more. We need to get to the truth of the conversations. And if I rattle some cages, oh well. But it's time to have the conversation. So we have 10 minutes, and I spoke a lot more than I wanted to. Let's talk about it. Attitude about mental health. Real quickly, what do you think about what's going on in our communities? Are we having the conversation? Are we having the right conversations?
Not yet.
Not yet. We're working on it. Right. We are beginning to acknowledge that we do have issues. Right. We're not as well. Let me just back up. From my own family, we're not there yet. In my immediate family, yes. But in my dad, so my mom just got diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Right. My dad has glaucoma. We have not talked about what that means. He's not willing to have that conversation yet. He's not there. There's some things I want to have the conversation about, but he's not acknowledging this. So I can't have that conversation. So in my own family, my wife and I and our girls, we talk about this. But I'm not sure I will be ever to reach him where I need to reach him, because he's not there. But I'm not going to force it. Because you can't make somebody talk when they don't want to talk. So we're not having the right conversation, and we need to continue the conversation, and we have to dispel the myths and stigmas around mental health. We must recognize the trauma the barriers. Not enough of us look like us. Let me go back to this. I bypass some of this though. But we don't have people that look like us in therapists. We don't have enough people in positions of power that look like us. And when they get in positions of power, they get dehumanized. I remember not too long ago when Michelle Obama was in there, they called her a monkey. You know, I was offended with that. And I don't even know Michelle. But I was offended that they would take a beautiful black sister and make her a monkey. Yeah. So how do we get around these things? We got to have the honest conversation. And if you can't control your outer circle, control your inner circle. That's.
I think we spend too much time talking about the things we don't have instead of the things that we do have.
All right, good ones. Thank you. Yeah, we do. So we have some who are in here licensed counselors. My brother's going to take me on as a client. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, awesome. And I'm glad to see also, we talk about color, but gender is also an issue. I came out of in the military, my entire career, except for the last 6 years, I was around men. Never had to deal with women. In the last 6 years, I had to supervise women. And I had to learn how to do that because I didn't know how. So I sat down with a female NCO, said, listen, help me, because I don't understand that. And then I got married and had children, and they were all girls. Now, here's my first trauma. How do you raise girls? I don't know. And then I came home one day, this is way too much information. I came home one day and my girl's about 8 or 9 and she done had the conversation about menstrual cycle. So I walked to the door. Dad, what's up? What's up? Guess what? What? We talk about our periods. I froze. And I looked at her to give me some direction, and she celebrated. So I said, oh, that's so nice. I didn't know what to say. I'm sorry. Y'all laughing. That was the truth. I didn't know what to say, right? I had to be coached. I have to be coached. There's always a method to my madness. You thought I just brought that story up? No, I had to be coached, but I had to be willing to be coached. All right, we have 5 minutes, and I have to get out of here because they have to set up for the next group. Takeaways.
Language is important and permission matters.
Language is important, permission matters. Okay, what else?
We have work to do.
We got a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do.
I also think that besides looking at stigma from an external component, particularly as populations of color, we need to start looking within ourselves also. And I think reflection is a big part of where we need to start heading. Many of us that are doing the work also get fatigued, just as we were talking. And I think removing that stigma from ourselves.
Yes.
It's a first step of stone. If we can't do it, then how are we asking them to do it?
Yes, right. And give yourself permission to say, it's okay not to be okay. It's okay not to be okay. My wife and I have grown into this thing that every 90 days we take time for us. And now that our kids are gone, it's even better. Yeah. And when we mean us, we go away. Sometimes the local hotels, because if we stay at home, folks have a tendency, I'm in your neighborhood. You live out there by SeaWorld. No, you're not. So we have to get away. And only certain people know where to find us. Okay, what else? Sir?
She said, it's sort of, my grandmother went out in the South, she used to always say, you can't punch your face off the face.
Yes.
So we also have to be able to understand that perhaps another race can help us.
Yes, yes, yes.
Because the stigmatism that we have of historical racism, then we just believe that white people won't help us.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? The world has changed.
It is changing.
There are good white people as well as good black people. So we go across the Mexican people, good even Asian.
Yes.
You know what? And we can reach out to each other.
Thank you, sir. That's so good. That's really good. We have to learn to be multicultural in our approach to stuff. That's good. Some of us have no choice because we're in that environment. I'm a better person today because I lived in a multicultural world. I saw a hand and I didn't see it no more. Yes, ma'am.
I think kids are really truly gonna move into treatment for somebody. Sometimes the person themselves don't have the words and speak up about what they're experiencing. We have to use the family. Yes, honoring this person's rights and privacy. You don't have to share anything that's going on with him, but let me tell you what I'm seeing.
Right.
Let me tell you what's going on. It's unsafe. I'm asking for you to treat him because far too often, somebody might have a severe illness, but they get diagnosed with depression because that person said, well, I'm feeling a little down. But in reality, at home, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the pushbacks that we come across is, well, we can't share nothing, you can't get homework, and you don't have a release of information. But we have to be open to what the family members are saying because they're truly the ones that have the in and out of what's going on.
You have to be open to listen.
Educating the family.
Educating the families.
Because for the older generations, some of them still don't believe that mental illness is real.
Oh, by far.
So educating them and helping them to help their family members who are separated.
Educating the family members. It's been a while since my kids have been in school, but they used to have this thing, just say no to the drugs. What was that slogan? Just say no. Yes, yes. And I went to the principal one day and said, you know, that really is not appropriate for all cultures. Because say no to a culture that, for instance, French, they drink around the table. They drink for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. When I was in Germany, you go to a bar and it's a family. The baby starts crying, take the pacifier, dip it in some beer, and give it to the child. We was it was so normal over there, right? So, hey, see? So my point is, you tell them to just say no, but culturally it's accepted. So the program was not culturally relevant. All right, one more, then I had to stop because the next group is getting ready to come up. One more. What's your takeaway?
When people have the conversation, have the resources for people.
Yes, and that's why I think that this conference, with all the resource tables out there, it is powerful. Please stop by every table and get as much information as you can. All right, I think that's all I can do. I'm done in time. And I gave back 2 minutes. That don't happen in church.